Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome from Jairangam team, the Creative Arts Academy, Women Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Arts Leadership Council, and all of us here who've joined together to have a chat with you about reimagining and devising during these challenging times. This is the fourth in the international webinar series that we have had till now. And the past few webinars have definitely brought out few things that all of us have been discussing in our private and professional lives is that these times have allowed us to pause, to reflect, to relook at our personal lives, thoughts, feelings, and also at our creative work. How do we move from here? What is necessary? What is not necessary? Are we going to move towards minimalism? Are we going to make it more technical? Is it going to be a hybrid situation of virtual and real? And those are the two different worlds we are going to exist in. What will happen and what is happening right now is something that all of us have been discussing since past few days. And today I have many stalwarts join me. They're joining me here to have a conversation. I have Anita Namdi from Chennai. I have Samara Hersch from Melbourne, Australia. I have Bhai Baldeep Singh ji from Delhi, Quasar from Mumbai, and Sanjoy Roy from Delhi. So, as you can see, it's a very starlit panel today, and I am a bit nervous, a little more than earlier days, because when you have such stalwarts who've done huge body of work, the balance remains. I mean, how do you create a balance in the panel so that they are all able to share with you what they have done? Is the onus remains with you. So I hope I'm able to do justice to their wonderful bodies of work and we make it meaningful for you today morning. I would quickly like to introduce everyone right in the beginning and then start the conversation. Anita Ratnamdi, who is a very dear friend, and I admire her personally and her body of work, is an Indian classical and contemporary dancer and choreographer. Founder director of Arangam Trust, she started Nartaki.com, India's first dance portal. So it was already virtual for performing artists and connoisseurs. Anita Ratnam is best described as an intersectionist whose work weaves the many disciplines of dance, theatre, spoken word, ritual, dramaturgy, and women's issues. Her formal training in Bharatnatyam, Mohiniyattam, and Kathakali, and educational degrees in English literature, dance, theatre, and women's studies have given her a unique movement vocabulary. And she's done some amazing curatorial series during these times, and we are looking forward to hear it from her. Sanjoy Roy from India, another dear friend and someone who's always a kind of arts leader in our country, showing us the way to how to go about things in ways more than one, is the managing director of Teamwork Arts and has produced or directed over 50 theatre productions which have toured worldwide. Currently, he is the producer of the annual Jaipur Literary Festival and Mahindra Excellence for Theatre Awards. He has received the National Award for Excellence and Best Director for the film Shah Jahanabad, The Twilight Years. He is the founder, trustee of Salam Balak Trust, and some wonderful work happens in that trust. Please do check it out. Providing support services for street and working children in the inner city of Delhi. He is co-chair of the Art and Culture Committee of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, that is FICCI, and advisor to the Arts Council of England Diversity Board for Theatre. Welcome, Sean Joy. Welcome, Anita Ji. And I would like to introduce Bhai Baldeep Singh ji, another dear friend. He is my lockdown friend. So a lot of lockdown friends that you have met in these days. From India is a pioneering polymath in cultural conservation and founder of the Anath Foundation, a community non-profit dedicated to conserving the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of South Asia, with a particular focus on the near extinct Gurbani Sangeet Parampara. So it's a very rare work that he's doing, and I request all of you to check Anath Foundation's work, which is not very well known with a lot of communities here throughout India. While quarantined in 2020, he engaged with the custodians of culture globally through his ongoing Yaranath virtual battle series, which is in fact one of the longest running series right now during the pandemic times. He connected with the last living bearers of Kursic excellence and assimilated their oral relatives, narratives, and musical knowledge, and also trying to conserve a lot of other heritage and art processes. Quasar, who is a delight, it's a delight to see his work for most of us in India because he's the torch bearer of the coming times. Quasar is an Indian stage director and a theatre holic. Quasar, a founding member of THESPO and a producer of plays with QTP since 1999, has recently devised every brilliant thing for virtual viewing. Um, Presently, he is also serving on the Festival Committee of Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai International Lit Fest. He is a passionate crusader for the survival of theatre in the public consciousness. Also, Quasar's famous Thespo Festival starts tomorrow. So all of you must tune in to catch the festival. And I'm very grateful that he's taken out time to be with us today. Welcome, Quasar. Welcome, Baldeep ji. Samara Hersch, who's joining us from Australia, is a theatre maker, director, and teaching artist whose practice explores the intersection of contemporary performance and community engagement. Her current research is an exploration into public acts of intimacy, particularly through imagining new performative frames for non professional performers and audiences to inhabit. She was a recipient of the British Council Realize Your Dream Award and the Keith and Elizabeth Murdoch Travel Fellowship. Australia Council for the Arts, Artist in Residency Program at City of Melbourne Arts and Participation. Her directorial credits include We All Know What's Happening, which received the Green Room Award for Best Contemporary and Experimental Performance. Body of Knowledge, a work made with teenagers from around the world that phone into the live audience. And I would love it if Samara would like to share something about this one. Sex and Death, a conversation piece that attempts to destigmatize older bodies. And the books. Have I said it right, Samara? Bravo to me. A collaboration with Chambermaid and a choir of Yiddish singers in Melbourne. So, welcome to all of you, and I really look forward to today morning and listening to all the details of wonderful creative and curatorial work that all of you have done during the pandemic times. As they say that, it's arts that helps us retain sane, but it's also art that is quite maddening, but eventually it kind of retains sanity in humanity. So over to you, Sean Joy. Maybe I'll start with Sean Joy first. Uh, as I said, that you have been an arts leader for a very long time in India. It's like never say die attitude that you come up with. And that's the same thing that you have shown during the pandemic times. I've been watching the teamwork arts very closely since past few months. Uh, what has been your inspiration or ideas during these times? You have successfully created a model for Jaipur Lit Fest. I've seen it, you know, have its editions continuously for many months. And recently we saw it was there in America. The New York edition and other editions were there. You've done something for children and also Mahindra Excellence for Theatre Awards that had its delightful evenings virtually happened. What uh, ha- what ideas did you bring forward, and how have you managed to do these things successfully? Your experiences vis-a-vis audience. What has been the audience engagement, and how has your experience been personally, Sanjoy, about this virtual medium?
Thanks, Ramanjit, and as usual, congratulations for getting us all on board and on time, and welcome
Thank
to
you.
all our panelists on this program. Um, Absolutely. When the lockdown happened, March 21st or 22nd, I had actually just returned on the 6th of March, which was no, I think on the 11th of March, I'd come back. I'd come back to India on the 6th of March from London and Morocco. We were looking at our new festival in Morocco. And I literally came in screeching on that last day, or the first day where you had to file your medical status when you landed at the airport, which was a nightmare. And on the 11th or the 12th, I think I went off to Udaipur because we were trying to set up a new heritage conference in Udaipur with Shriji and with our colleagues who had come in from Edinburgh. And that really was the last time I traveled. Um, just pre the lockdown, we had a wonderful, cozy in-house wedding that we did, and that was the last public occasion.
Right.
And that Monday, we were locked down. When the lockdown happened, the automatic um, sort of default mode that everybody, at least in our community and most parts of the world, went into was, first sort of just revel in the fact that you weren't going to office and you were going to be at home, and that this would pass. And pretty early in the day, we were very clear that this was not going anywhere. And at that point of time, I was
Yeah.
the president of EMA, and I kept exhorting my colleagues in EMA, saying that, folks, if you don't start reinventing your space, you're going to be caught without, a paddle in a very fast-moving current, and that's roughly happened. So, given what we were able to do in EMA pretty quickly, we were able to get the lockdown Sunday concert. I sort of took heed, and with our colleagues at JLF, I said, let's start a series. And 4th of April, we started a series called JLF's Brave New World. And, Ramanjit, what was interesting for us is that in that first month, and we were doing 6 broadcasts a week, and I
Yes.
kept exhorting my colleagues saying that, it's not finding traction. Who's watching? Can't we get people to watch? Here's an opportunity. And when the figures came in at the end of that month, we realized that people had been watching, and we'd already crossed about 100,000 views for that month. Right now, after about 160 episodes of JLF Brave New World, we've had about 4.8 million people who've been viewing these episodes, and this is outside of the festival stuff, outside of JLF London or USA, which I'll come to. But what was really interesting was that, in the main festival at the Jaipur Literature Festival, our capacity in our biggest venue, which is the front lawn, is about 13,300 people per hour. And here online, our average audience turns out to be 29 to 32,000 per session,
Right.
so per hour. So it's a completely different world. And then what we realized that, geographically, we became agnostic. So it didn't matter whether JLF was in Jaipur or whether it was in London or whether it was in USA. We were being able to reach out to audiences that we didn't earlier have
Yes.
access to. So JLF Brave New World today, the third highest international viewership that we have is actually from Germany. And Germany had not registered on our Jaipur Literature Festival viewing parameters for the last 13 years. I mean, even
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia in 2020 registered with a 0.9% registration or attendance, but never Germany. So that
Right.
gave us a sense of that. Who are these people? Who are we reaching out to? And similarly, Ramanjit, you were part of Meta, and you saw
Yeah.
the way that we were able to take Meta online. Very difficult to do theater online. The jury
Yes.
is still out on that, I think. But we were able to take a sense of meta. We did sessions, we did the Lifetime Achievement Award, we did the awards night, and all of that finally accumulated over 400,000 people who viewed it. And given that on a regular meta, if you remember, Ramanjit, our
Yeah.
maximum attendance in a day over the two theatrical productions that we would do would be about 1,200 people. This is like phenomenal, So again, an opportunity. How can we leverage the opportunity? I think that's the $1 million question. The jury is out on that. And how can artists leverage that? So, as you know, we started Art Matters, the advocacy program around the arts, primarily because in one of the first task force meetings that I was part of with the Ministry of Finance and other people, I was asked, तो ये artist लोगों को पैसे क्यों चाहिए होता है? Why do artists need money? Ask them to donate to our the PM Cares.
Absolutely.
And I had to say that not every artist was Shah Rukh Khan or Sonu Nigam, and that the arts or the creative economy includes everybody from the ragi in the Gurdwara to the toy maker in Banaras, the Kathakali performer to the tent house person, the flower designer in Newmarket in Calcutta, to the caterer who caters for weddings, etc. And
Right.
we then realized that there are 8 different ministries in India that look to the arts. There's no one ministry, and then because of this, it's so spread out. And which is the reason we started the Arts Advocacy Art Matters program, and it culminated with a 6.5-hour performance by varied artists. 450 artists came
That
together to
was
raise
amazing.
resources, as you know, and we were able to raise about so far we've been able to raise about 65 or 67 lakhs, and we've been able to help 5,200 artist families across the country. But this is a drop in the ocean. So,
Mm.
when it comes to how do we leverage this, that's the big million
Yes.
dollar question. And how does this format work for theater and for dance? Because
Mm.
dance, you need to be able to capture the facial expression, the hand movements, and the foot movements in the Indian tradition. And if
I
you're going
think
to
even
do that,
for music, given the technical challenges, even the music faces a lot of problem over there. Yeah, please continue.
Ramanjit, I think music has been able to crack it, and whether it's orchestras across the world or even in India, and we found that if you pre-record, pre-mix, pre-edit, you can
Mhm.
do successful concerts. And more we're being able to raise money for musicians and for the music fraternity, less so for theater and dance. Anything that goes into the more evolved artistic segments, it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think therein lies, our biggest challenge. And I think the second challenge that we'll see moving on, digital is here to stay. I don't see this going away, COVID or no COVID. So even say by 2023, 24, when COVID is behind us, physical events start again and we're able to come together, I do believe that the digital space will continue to flourish. The challenge is, do we need to reinvent, or can we use this occasion to
Right.
relook at some of our classical and traditional and contemporary arts? I mean, Anita Ratnam is here. She's been doing this
Yes.
for so long. I mean, it predates, the
So
most intense festival. So,
I'll take
uh,
that cue to move to Anita. Were you finishing any a
no,
sentence
no,
or
go
yeah?
right ahead.
I'll take
We'll
the
come
cue
back.
to move to Anita D. Anita D, you are an intersectionist, and you move between mediums. You try to collect artists from different mediums, and you've always tried to create non-conventional genre, whether in dance or whether you did the Chennai festival in that beautiful small museum. How has the pandemic affected your work? Of course, I know personally it's been very exciting, but I would like you to share it with the audience. The box series that you started with, which was the first series that you started, gave a space to and the thought to different artists all over the world to negotiate with the space where in which they were locked in, and challenge themselves in terms of what is the expression, how would they like to express in those spaces. Then recently you've come up with Kutti Kahani, the Eternal Stories. Also now Andel's Garden is opening today. I think, is it premiering today? It premiered
Yes,
in the morning at 6 a.m. Yes,
yes,
yes.
yes.
And for virtual viewing. So, if you could share some details of this curatorial and creative pieces that you came up with during these times.
Sure.
Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Ramanjit. Good morning to the distinguished panel. Thank you, Sanjoy. You echoed several thoughts that I had. My last stage performance was on the 15th of March in Baroda. And I remember that when I landed in Ahmedabad and then went to Baroda, I found I was the only one wearing a mask because already in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, we had been alerted and we were alarmed with growing numbers. And everybody in Gujarat was just moving around as if, what's COVID? And I was a bit alarmed because the conference that I had committed to performing in, uh, they didn't cancel, but nobody there was also wearing a mask. So I was actually looking a bit unfriendly because I was stepping back, staying away. And I had two people from my team from Chennai, and they were also in masks and they were a bit aghast. Anyway, we came back on the 16th of March, and then we know what happened. I think the first few days I was sort of in paralytic shock in the sense, where do we get
Mm,
our basic stuff? It was all about where do I buy my milk and where do I buy this and where do I buy that? It was the basic issues took over. But then I thought, why not take this moment of either confusion and uncertainty? And so even before Boxed Ramanjit, I launched just a written series called Pandemic Ponderings. And I just called my friends through Facebook and said, what are you going through now? So
mm,
there was a professor from New York who said she couldn't go to meet to see her daughter when she was delivering her child. There was somebody
mm,
else who couldn't go to somebody had passed, and it was
yes.
not a COVID death, but India was on complete lockdown during those 2 or 3 weeks. So they couldn't go to mourn a death. They could. So we actually put out a series from April 1st to 30th. It was a written series, and it was called Pandemic Ponderings, where everybody would just share whatever the vulnerabilities or their current situation was. It was most illuminating because I cut across generations as well. It was very interesting that younger generation was saying, oh, Anita Didi, this is a great time. I'm working on graphic imaging. I'm doing something with graphics. The younger generation was they were already in this sort of digital world they had become
Yes.
immersed in. But now I'm coming to Boxed. Even between the first 10 or 2 weeks of the lockdown, I realized that our best friends are going to be our handheld phones and our mobile devices, and that's how we're going to be connecting with the world. So I
Mm,
said, what are we going to do with dancers? Many of them were living alone. They were not living with family, no support, but this and that phone was going to be their window. So actually taking that opportunity of isolation and vulnerability, we reached out to classical and contemporary dancers and to people like you, Ramanjit. You know, you sent in such a beautiful submission. So we said, we give you 2 minutes and we want you to explore movement. If you're classically trained, you start with a minute of classical phrasing and then move into
yeah.
something else. Then I realized that while some of them were very good dancers, some of them had no idea where to place the cameras. So it became a dance for camera project. So we got the editors involved. Two young people were telling the dancers, place the camera here, place the camera here. I was in a shower. They said, strap the camera to the roof. So it became such a collaborative, and it became very exciting. But at one
Yeah.
point, I set it off, and then I stepped back because this young tech team just sort of took over. They took over and they were talking to the dancers. And Ramanjit, you actually resonated with the horror of the migrant workers at that point when you did your piece under the table and
Yeah.
about rummaging for food. It's such a moving piece at that time. So we got a lot of interest from Academy and other people in the UK because they were also scrambling for software. I mean, they didn't have content. They had no content. So Box launched in mid-May and it went on for 7 weeks. Yes, it was a very, very big hit. And Sanjoy was talking about numbers. We realized that we shouldn't get dejected if we only have double-digit numbers when it first views. The
Yes.
accumulated viewing is
Hmm.
what the accumulated viewing is what built. So
Yeah.
some of them got 50, 70, 80,000 views, and over a period of time, of a few editions got over 1 lakh views. So that was an important lesson for me. We were also very, very honored when Asa Debu approached us and said that he would like to premiere his digital films on our platform. So that was wonderful because we had a lot of people sending us films they
Hmm.
already had, some short films they had made. So it ended up being a rich 7 week series. After which we did, during Navratri, month of October, we did Devi Diaries.
Yeah.
We just called out to dancers across the world and said, what do you have to say about Devi? And in this, we also reached out and we looked at gender because we went out and asked dancers who were openly transsexual, gay, and they were delighted to be able to express what they felt about the goddess or the feminine in them. And I thought that was a very important moment for us because here was a platform in which one moment you'll see a Bharatanatyam dancer do something very traditional or a Odissi dance, and then you'll have somebody else discuss sexuality. And I felt the digital platform sort of democratized all kinds of expression, which if you would not get a presenter to curate kind of a festival that brought a classical dancer set, certainly not in a Chennai December Sabha.
Hmm.
And then the Kutti Kahani, the stories by young children about stories of the soil, produced by a great colleague of mine. Again, the digital platform that we have developed has given, between the ages of 6 and 13, 50 stories, one a day, of, maybe a girl whose name was Hiranyakshi. Like, what does her name mean? Like,
Hmm.
just when it comes out of the mouth of babes, even known stories sound fresh. So
Hmm.
instead of having grown-ups almost talking down to children and saying, this is a deer, when you have a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old actually doing the story of the golden deer from the Ramayana, it takes on a kind of a freshness. So that's actually doing very, very
That's
well. We will
wonderful.
go
Yeah.
we will go through December 31st with
So tell us
Putikahani.
a bit about the Andel's Garden that opened
Anda just
today.
started. Yeah, so Anda is a very dear. She's one of the early mystic poet saints, 9th century, so
Yeah.
much earlier than the better known Meera Lal Ded. And she imagined herself to be the mystic bride of Krishna. But this year I said, let's not make it a temple, Bharatanatyam, Carnatic music, kind of a possessive world. Let me introduce her poetry and her imagination to dancers across styles. So for the very first time, Manipuri dancers, Mohiniyattam dancers, a Kathakali dancer, a Kathak dancer, an Odissi dancer, the lyrics stay in Tamil, but we've had original music and created in a way in conversation with dancers, again, 4 to 5 minutes, and that premieres at 6 a.m. because the
Hmm.
tradition in Dhanur Mas, which starts tomorrow morning, is the early wake up, the early rising to listen to these songs, which are part of a congregational liturgical tradition here in Tamil Nadu, all across. And even in Tirupati, Tirumala, these are the songs that are played in the morning instead of the Shuprabhat.
That's
So
very
to really,
interesting. And
yeah, so to
and
introduce the poetry of this amazing young girl, she was a teenager, to
yeah.
the rest of India, at least to the classical performers of India, along with personal diaries from me about how I first performed, what have been my experiences,
Wow.
how Vaijayantimala has come to epitomize my generation, that kind of embodiment of this goddess, how she's influenced other poets, which included Lal Bir and Sakubai, Janabai, and Mirabai. So yeah, it's an
That's a
interesting journey of
wonderful, yeah.
continuous ideas. I
Mhm.
myself have not danced. I just haven't been inspired in that sense to get up and dance. But I have realized, Ramanjit, as I think many of us have, that the kind of back-end investment we need to do in terms of some, either the equipment we upgrade in, the kind of logistics that we invest in. And
True,
I've
true.
been most supported. I think I'd say it's a generational thing, let me tell you, that I am, while I can consider myself sort of tech savvy, nowhere near the younger generation and how nimble they are with technology. So
Right.
I'm so grateful to have this amazing young team. This is completely new. This is only because of
That's so
pandemic I've been
wonderful,
able
Anita,
to,
and it's a
create the team.
huge, yeah, it's a huge eclectic body of, series of curatorial work that you've done. And I'll come back to you. At this moment, I move on to Bhai
Thank
Baldeep
you.
Singh, ji, who's the, thanks, Anita, ji, as the founder of the Anath Foundation and the conservationist of near extinct Gurbani Sangeet Parampara. And Baldeep ji, you shared with me that, in the classical music tradition of India, Gurbani Sangeet does not even feature. So that came as a huge hit to me, who comes from a Sikh tradition, and I don't even know these facts because I, uh, did my master's in music. Having said that, we don't even know what's happening in the larger cultural scenario of India. What are the things that have been looked at, the heritage that suffered because of partition. But you've been working tirelessly for 35 years, and we salute you for your continuous, tireless efforts in this conservation. And we also wish you all the best for this very difficult task. And I request everyone to have a look at Anath Foundation work. Today, we would like to talk about the one of the longest batted series that has been going on, which is mapping the journey of various artists from all over the world, their thought processes, their philosophies, their heritage, and the details of their work. I've been watching the batted series also, like all the other works, very closely, and I feel that the number of hours that you spend talking to an artist, and it's like anywhere between 2 hours to 9 hours, which helps in bringing out the detail. Of course, it's a longish process, so it's a very strong archive that is being made. So my question to you today is, that one, if you would like to share a few thoughts about the Betted series. Also, you're not using Zoom or StreamYard. You're technically very sound person, so you've used special sound software, special software to showcase this. Because while we are negotiating with this space, like Anita, these editors are good. Sanjoy has an amazing technical team. You've been single-handedly handling the software. What is the software that you're using? How do you manage sound? And what are the platforms that you're using? So, few thoughts about the series, but also a bit about the technology that you've been using on your own.
Well, greetings to all my co-panelists, and thank you, Ramanjit, for your kind invitation. Although I
My
find
pleasure.
myself a little out of place, perhaps, but it's such a joy always to listen and learn from when Sanjoy and Anita and they speak, they share their experiences, and I'm looking forward to listening to the other panelists as well. Thank you for your kind introduction. You mentioned a few things, the Yadanad, ongoing Yadanad virtual Batak series, but you also mentioned about the Gurbani Sangeet tradition. I mean, talking of technology, I'm an ex-pilot. So I was a champion aero modeler when I was in my early teens and so on and so forth, very early. I used to design planes, use technology. So technology, I'm versed with it. I've been a film editor. Being in a non-profit space, we have to learn how to do everything. Being a
Right.
filmmaker, a avid photographer, and so on and so forth. So that came handy, converge whenever I do. You mentioned about, let me begin with the Gurbani Sangeet tradition. As a thinker, if I may, there is a serious problem, the way arts and crafts, or generally the vernacular, the cultural riches, the cultural fabric of our civilization has been handled, especially since 1947. Individual efforts somehow are, or a few individuals somehow are being mistaken for the entire nation. And the nation is much bigger. There's there are, broadly speaking, there are two spaces, not for profit, but again, not for profit being used by successful individuals. That's not the real not for profit space. Not for profit from a philosophical perspective would be when you're not doing something for your own self. It's for something greater. And there is the for-profit space. The non-for-profit space also, what I meant is the non-careerist space. That's really very feeble or severely underserved, or perhaps simply near extinct. I mean, it's near extinct because there are some attempts that I'm versed with, including mine. There are efforts, yes, but given the large canvas that India as a nation is, as I was mentioning earlier, these efforts are not sufficient to safeguard the vernacular riches, just to underscore that point. The actual focus is so non-existent that I cannot even imagine what would it have been if I had not renounced my aviation career 30 years ago. I was to fly fighters for the Air Force. And 30 years without a paycheck. So I'm the one who's funding my endeavors. The Gurbani Sangeet tradition would not even find a mention. It did not since 1947. What goes around in the name of the newly coined Gurmat Sangeet really borrows from the contemporary Khayal, Ghazal, and Tumri music genres. Instruments like the taus, for example, if I may, let me see if I can share the screen with you guys. Okay. Application window, keynote. Let's see. Oh, okay. It doesn't matter. I'll avoid that. It just says it was.
No, I would
earlier
request the audience to go to an art foundation and have a look
it's
at
fine.
it.
Yeah. I had while Anita and Sanjoy were talking, I actually queued up some images, but that's all right. Instruments. Imagine the instruments that I actually handcrafted back to life. Actually handcrafted as a former aero modeler, champion aero modeler. The taus, the rabab, the dhurpadi rabab, the saranda, the jodi. They were non-existent. Nobody cared for them. The nation did not. Non-profits did not. For-profit, I mean, the corporates, as part of the the social responsibility programs and so on and so forth, they did not. The pre-Darbari age of the pre-Darbari age Dhurpad, the chant singing and the war singing that I have actually revived back. These would have been forgotten.
I mean,
This is just
really
brief about the
phenomenal work.
Gurbani Sangeet aspect. I mean, but for others to know as well that there is that part of our heritage and so much else that are in the last 33 years that I've been journeying and traveling. I've seen Odisha or the mountains, the Himalayas, and so on and so forth. Even Rajasthan, the sands, where there's a lot that is yet to be mapped or that was never mapped. Now coming to the Yaranath Virtual Batak series that you mentioned about the software, I checked everything. Of course, I have my students. There's a small team who are very updated technologically because I live in as a conservator, as an actual blue-collared conservator, where I actually hand carve. I actually have to do hands-on work. I had Japneet and Gundeep, Ishwardeep and Ramli, and four of my students, and Nihal, where I say, well, I have this idea and I need, what do you say? What software do we do? So we went on searching, of course, being an audio aspect. I found that Zoom and others were compressing a lot. They were made for mass, like 200 people, 300 people, etc. At that time it was 200. Now they're growing, and so on and so forth. So although I'm not here to speak on for softwares, they're not paying me. But Ecamm Live is the software that I chose because one, it plugs in with Skype. It does not compress the audio to 32 kilohertz and so on and so forth. So those were technological reasons why I had to choose that. Of course, it's a annual subscription that I'm using. It allows me to do plenty. Yes, set up a trend. Then the other aspect was the audio. Oh, by the way, you have my very dear friend Roberto Procella is one of your panelists.
Yes,
he invented my classroom. I tested his platform, although it was made from 0 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That platform is just extraordinary, called My Class, but it is made exclusively for one-to-one teaching and is being used by some of the top conservatories and some of the top universities, including Ivy League universities. So I checked all of them.
Coming on 18 to share about that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then audio was paramount. I was, technologically handicapped, under lockdown in Rome at the Institute of South Asian Studies, hosted by Dr. Tiziana Lorenzetti and Valerio, her husband, and her sister Francesca. My laptop, I had an aging laptop, yes, whose speakers decided not to speak to me no more. Then something was stuck in the earplug mini jack, which meant I needed a cordless microphone. Given the long hours that I was engaging in, my early Betex would show you my earplugs going off and I'm holding a Bluetooth speaker next to it because I have to. It was crazy, but I had to deal with that. Then the most important thing for me was content, which is paramount, of course. What should be the format? Now, I did not want to host concerts unless I was able to procure funding for the artists I was wanting to engage in, which I'm planning to hopefully, if there are people listening, there are ideas that I have in terms of how to do a web series and so on and so forth. But then I relied on the 33-year-old Anad Oral History Project that I began since '87. Then, of course, under the Vidyasar project, I chose the name Anad in 2004 for my projects, inspired from Guru Gobind Singh's Nade Anade Nangi Swarupe. I went unplugged. I went unplugged to engage in muse-e-conversations. So from musings, I call them muse-e-conversations, as I, which also includes, of course, people from various walks. I mean, it's not just music only. As you mentioned, they are artists, they are thinkers, they are poets, they are sculptors, etc. So this is how it has been, and I'm so glad that when I began on the 17th of April, the kind of conversations I began having, it became so many people in Europe, in the West and in the East, of course, were so inspired that a tradition of conversations began across the globe. So Yaranad is not just, its contribution is not just in what it has done over 650 plus hours in about 165 sittings. But the fact that it inspired, it showed that we could actually engage in a conversation, because my purpose is not just there's YouTube, there's, there's so many other Vimeo and others, there's so much music and things out there. I did not want just to pack more in that space. I thought, let me show the process of what is it to become a knowledgeable one. What is the process? What does it take to produce a knowledgeable one? And what do you say? How do you think? How do you touch a note or hold a pen when you are a knowledgeable one? So it's that process as a luthier, as a pedagogue, head of a tradition which is now 5¼ centuries old, with a memory bank which is pre-Darbari, pre-courts, which binds me to the ancient Indic idea, which was always sovereign, the uncolonized India, because my family was not within the British India kind of a thing. So the narrative survived. So all that, the process of recovering, where does the civilization lie? Where does the idea of sovereignty lie? what actually is freedom. People, it's a chic factor. People who are so enslaved by an idea, they speak of the words freedom, etc. So anyway, I grip these aspects, and I have tried to put together something, and I'm glad that it has resonated so well. Thank you for listening.
Yes, it has, because it makes the Batik series one of the most inspirational archival work in terms of conserving arts heritage, the intangible heritage that we have world over. So thank you so much for that. I move on to Samara. Samara, your recent research is an exploration into public acts of intimacy. How much have the pandemic situation inspired you to reimagine, redevise methods of your research? And if you could share something about your recent work, during these times, it would be lovely. I read about some while I was reading your bio, so if you could go ahead and share.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. It's really amazing to be here, and I feel it's with all of you, and it's really illustrative of the times we're in, that we can somehow find these ways to be
Really
together
helps to connect,
across all these distances. Yeah, and this is actually, a very big part of my research, which started actually before COVID. I was making a piece called Body of Knowledge, which I might just talk through. I was going to show some images, but I think for the sake of time, it's perhaps easier. So
pictures are always nice.
Okay,
audiences enjoy them.
Well, let's see. Okay. So what can you see?
Yes,
do you see?
We do.
Do you see orange chairs? Yes, great. Okay, so this is a work that I made last year in as part of my master's at Das Theatre in Amsterdam, which is actually where I normally live. And I might stop sharing for a moment just to talk for a moment. So I've actually been based in Amsterdam and flew to Melbourne for my mother's birthday in February, and then both my flights got cancelled and I'm still here. So it's also been quite a disruptive year. And in any case, it's interesting because so much of what I'm thinking about in my work is how we can be together. And because I've been living away from family and friends and community, and a lot of my work is very community-based, that sort of has inspired a lot of how I think about, distance, intimacy, proximity. So I go back to sharing. So Body of Knowledge was a work that I made. It's sharing again, yeah. It was a work that I made in Amsterdam, and it has toured quite a bit to different parts of the world. And the last time we played it in the theatre was in February this year in Belgium. And the idea of the work is that it's a collaboration with teenagers from different parts of the world, where they phone.
Yes,
Can you hear me
absolutely.
okay? Yeah, great. Where they phone into the live audience. So here's the audience arriving, and they've each been given a mobile phone, and it's sort of a bespoke teenage-inspired mobile phone for their evening. And they arrive at their chair, and they wait. They're asked to put their phones on the table. And, I'm really interested in relational aesthetics, so the way that this group of people behave as a group of adults, very respectfully, a lot of distance, social distance, which now we're all very aware of. And they wait, and eventually the phone rings. And on the other end of the phone is a teenager phoning in from the other side of the world, perhaps, or, we've worked with kids in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Australia, in Belgium, in Switzerland. So there's a huge, at this point, community of teenagers who are part of Body of Knowledge. And they're phoning in with questions that they have that are inspired by the body or by body politic. That they wouldn't dare ask an adult in person. So the whole work is anonymous, and it's also, it's just the voice, which is very important to me, that it's non-representational. And so the phone, I've got a lot to say, so I'll try and be concise. And the audience at this point, can hear the person, they can't hear the questions, but they're listening to these broken up bits of advice that the adults are trying to share. And then slowly there's sort of different things that the teenagers ask the audience to do, like finding headphones, which start to change the behavior of the audience. So they are now, starting to share a teenager or share a conversation with a teenager. And these are two people who don't know each other at the beginning of the performance, but are now together starting this conversation and obviously sharing vulnerabilities, which is something I'm really interested in. And you see another group. Here they've been instructed to make popcorn, to find the microwave, to make popcorn and to share it with the audience. Here they're asked to find Spotify to play some music and to change the lighting. And so the whole mood starts to change. So people are, drinking beers, eating popcorn, listening to music. Then they are finding inflatable pizza slices that are hidden behind the curtains. And slowly all the relational aesthetics between the audience start to change. And in a way, these adults begin to act like teenagers. And really the work is centered around these conversations that these teenagers are trained to learn how to host, and nothing is scripted, nothing is listened to. So they're really empowered to ask what they want to ask and to, I guess, break down ideas of knowledge, ideas of experts, ideas of adults. Here they're invited to make a tent made out of bed sheets, and then the audience are now inside the tent together, behaving, incredibly differently to how they were right at the beginning on those orange chairs. And more things happen here, which I won't go into too much detail, but there's a whole sort of audio thing that starts to happen inside the tent. We also order the audience pizza, which arrives. So this is the piece that I was invited to be touring this. Hang on, I've now lost you. That I was invited to be touring this year. And of course, that's impossible on many, many levels. Proximity of the audience, sharing food. The whole work is built to make the audience get closer together. And this is now something that we're all dealing with in different ways, and also just touring in and of itself. A lot of theatres were closing, so a bunch of things happened. One was an invitation from a festival in Bern to very quickly respond, and from that I made a piece called "For the Time Being," which was a piece where teenagers. We were still doing these workshops together. So also I developed an online workshop model to be together. And for this, we was really thinking about how, kids are doing so much Zoom online through education, and the screen time is just incessant, as we all know. And also, you've got your WhatsApp, your Facebook, your email, really handy to disappear. So how to kind of keep teenagers together in an alternate space was a real challenge. Which I'm happy to talk about in more detail, but that was one aspect of the work, is just being together in these workshops. And then also, how to communicate with an audience. So For the Time Being, we asked the audience to take a walk, and they would receive a message with a question from a teenager. Because at that point in Australia, we were in also this very serious lockdown, which I believe you're in now. And leaving the house, we had an hour, and just to find that spot felt very important. And we would describe it, the teenagers would describe where they are, and then the audience would describe, and they would be invited to respond with a voice message. And again, there's a more elaborate, there's more to the project, but this is just the nutshell. But then we received a very exciting invitation from two theatre festivals, Theater Spektakel in Zurich and Summer Festival Kampnagel, to create an at-home version of Body of Knowledge, because our creative technologist was already, had already helped to develop a work that is partially remote. So what if the audience are also remote? And this, we were really strict, I guess, in thinking about it as an at-home work, not as a screen-based work, because so much of it is about listening and not about seeing. And also, we were really interested in the assembly, which is so much about the original work, is about that circle, about being together. And also what theatre invites is, this coming together that's quite rare. let's say, compared to gallery work or cinema, in the sense of we really are a temporary community. And so we were curious about how we create this assembly and this foyer feeling online, but then also how we really move the audience into their at-home space, into their private space. And again, we developed, because also for us, privacy is very important. We can't have kids phoning people. So each of the kids were delivered their own phone for the show. And we had a switchboard where someone was connecting the audience to the teenagers. So no phone numbers were ever shared, because this anonymity and safeguarding is very important. And people would receive phone calls in their homes. They'd also be joined with another audience member, and suddenly you're talking with an audience member and a teenager from all different parts of the world. Sanjoy, you mentioned this international, potential. We had, an audience of, with people from all different parts of the world at different time zones. So it was quite special in this way of being together and sharing knowledge. And I'm probably going way too long, but that's
No, that's wonderful. That sounds like a wonderful initiative. In fact, it reminds me of Goethe Institute project way back many years ago. It was called Kolkata Calling, and we had people in call centers here. They were actors, and they were negotiating spaces in Berlin and Hamburg and other spaces. So it was a very delightful project that they did. With that, we come to Quasar, who is kind of youth arts leader in our country. QTP has always stayed ahead in terms of doing things, experimenting with things. Q, you are muted. Over to you about all your projects that you've done during these pandemic times. And tomorrow, THESPO is starting. What are we looking forward to? And what have you planned? And what have you already done? You also did Every Brilliant Thing, which you showcased at Rang Shankara. You've done the Tata Literary Festival Live 2020. So over to you, Quasar. And thank you for joining us, because I know there's a huge lot of work that you have to do for tomorrow.
No, it's always good to come and talk about arts and theatre. Yes. It's always fun.
We love talking anyway.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, Shankar, we love talking.
I mean, it's kind of, it's true. It's kind of weird these last few months, actually. And I think both artistically and as curators, every 6 weeks is a re-looking and a reimagination of what this thing was. I mean, I remember when the lockdown started in April, as artistically, everyone wanted to just put out work, however bad, however, half-baked. Out work, that was the act of the exothermic act, of just sharing something. Because we were feeling like we were being denied out. And it's interesting, Sanjay mentioned about whether, is it theatre, is it not? I mean, we took a call quite early on to just call it live performance in whatever we did. But the concept of being live very, very strong with us. So we created any recorded material per se. Every Brilliant Thing came out actually quite late in the lockdown. I think we finally opened in July. And what happened was that when at least artistically for us, what happened was when the lockdown happened, we didn't quite understand it. And yes, there was a need to share with an audience and do this and do that, but what are we really sharing? What is this event really creating for us? And then because there was so much isolation and there was such a problem with regards to mental health and stuff, which is why we then reimagined Every Brilliant Thing, which had been running for the last year on ground, and we reimagined it for a Zoom performance. And then we ran it for about a month or so. And it was a limited audience. It was played live. Vivek, the performer, played from his apartment in Bangalore, and it was quite a lovely thing. But it was an adaptation of a play for the online space. It was not a play, because it was literally him welcoming people into his house and him, being welcomed into their house, even though they were all separate. And then there was a conversation with a mental health expert after that and stuff like that. And as we've gone through this entire process, we've constantly tried to reinvent and relook. So for the Ramshankara Festival, we created a performance called Lunch Girls, which really was an experiment for us to try and figure out, can something work in this medium? Again, it was live. We then played with software like OBS and stuff like that, and how do you make it interesting? And it's bizarre because the play was written in the 1980s about phone calls, and here we were in 2020 making it about video calls, but somehow it still works. It was 120 scenes in 55 minutes or something like that. But there was no interaction, unlike Every Billion Thing. What is remarkable actually is for us that we've discovered is, as curators, and this particularly with regards to Thespo, is what was the need that was being met at each phrase. And early on in the lockdown, a lot of young actors were being isolated at home. They were struggling, right? They were not able to perform. They were not able to meet. So Thespo came up with something called a Thespo Tuppary, which was 7 to 10 minute storytelling, one person, two camera. But bizarrely, they put an evening together of 2 evenings together actually of 6 and 6, which then played as a full 1 hour kind of performance. And that happened, there was someone who was playing Chandrasekhar Azad, who was live tweeting his last message before he, took on the British, kind of. This one woman in her house who's retelling about how she was molested on a bus, and then there was this other woman a young girl who came in with groceries and then told a story with the groceries. And this was young people all in their 18, 19, 20 years old, really now not worried about all the baggage that we have as people who are from the theatre and who are used to live art. They were just engaging with what they were handled, and it was quite fascinating. And then that developed further, and then which is when the call was taken that okay, let's do a festival this year. We weren't going to, but guys went, we'll do something and we'll reinvent. And multiple projects have come out of it, and the main plays, for example, are all performed all over the country or where they're from. And they are being kind of streamed online. What's been really useful is actually some of these ticketing portals have actually been very, very useful. And Insider has been very helpful in developing technologies along the way that can actually help and facilitate these kind of interactions. Because honestly, there is no software for live performance. It doesn't exist. And it didn't exist in April. It's got better now. Even Zoom, for example, you can now move, windows around and choose 2 people to spotlight rather than 1 person to spotlight, or, things like that. And things are being developed as we work. But at the end of the day, it's all jugaad. We're still using meeting softwares to do theatre, or we're using something else. We're all kind of, making it work. Sorry, you saying?
No, I'll say, continue. Please complete what you're saying. I'll share.
Okay. So eventually now we've come up with the Thespo Festival, which will open, like you said, tomorrow. And it's quite interesting because keeping in what Sanjoy was saying, suddenly the world is a smaller place. Even though we can't fly to each other's places. But so, for example, we've actually got projects that are happening with artists from India and Sri Lanka and Brazil and America and Canada and, stuff which ordinarily we wouldn't have that ease of access. And also these guys have then kind of broken boundaries. There's a piece called The Ministry of Mundane Mysteries, which is a series of 6 phone calls that happen across the week. So you actually have an episodic play that rolls out where you are part of. It's completely improvised. It's completely this thing. And this is something that's being developed because we are all detached. We can't be in the same space, And similarly, the plays that are happening, one of them is being performed in a garden. One of them is in a room in Madurai. It's just all over the shop. And that's really quite interesting. in the kind of formats that are coming. But again, I come back to the fact that they're not technically plays. These are all unique online performances that have been created to be received online. And the reason I say they're not technically plays is when we were working on something, we've one man walking through an empty space, one person watching, that relationship, that's what you need for the theater, all of this. And I believed that my entire life. And it's only when I started rehearsals for one of the pieces, for Every Brilliant Thing, that I realized a large part of the theater is actually the audience member being aware that they are watching something with someone else. So no matter how live it is and how it's not just about the physical space that you're sharing with the performer, it's about the physical space that you are watching as a community and that you are sharing that experience. And that's very different to a film or a OTT or a television, which is trying to create a 1:1 experience. They're trying to exclude the rest of the audience. If you look at, multiplex seats, they're deep and, you sink in, you're trying, you don't really see your person who's sitting next to you. But in the theater, the seats are all low back, you have a complete sense of community. And I think that's something that I learned about the theater work without actually going back to the theater yet. Is the fact that's what I miss. That's why all this online work, I think, is, I don't consider it theater and plays, but I do believe, I completely agree with Sanjoy, there will be a life for this after that. I think the way that young people, particularly within the Thespo format, but also around the world, have been developing formats, I think it will exist, post this period.
That very interestingly, and Ankit, now we can all come in a gallery. Thank you for that. Thank you, Quasar. And that very interestingly and organically brings us to the point that I was discussing yesterday with the panelists, that what happens post pandemic. And we were interestingly talking about the marriages and love affairs of the virtual and the real life mediums, because the virtual medium has helped us connect with each other. I'm not going to leave my connection with Samara or even Quasar for that matter, who's within India, or all of you post pandemic. I will bank upon this virtual space to have these connections, create collaborations, and also the audience reach that Sanjoy has talked about, Anita D has talked about. I know Baldeep Ji's Batak series has this crazy outreach in terms of numbers, and I'm sure Quasar, Ramebazi achieved, Quasar achieved, and Samara. So one is the wonderful connection or collaboration or marriage or love affair, as Vikram said, that arts has always been promiscuous, so this is the next step of promiscuity that we will have in terms of marrying the virtual and the real space. But also, Quasar, quickly, first I will ask you, because Sanjoy did hint upon kind of funds that they have raised for the artists. How's the funding been for Thespo specifically?
Okay, so
did you have retainers
Thespo
who still
anyway has always
continue
been
to give money?
crowdfunded.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So Thespo has always been crowdfunded, right? We've been crowdfunded for now almost 10 or 12 years of our 22.
Right.
There's been no corporate support, partly because the numbers or whatever. But it's quite an incredible thing, and it's quite lovely when 250 people year on year kind of send in their little checks and donations and stuff to keep it alive, and it's really wonderful because that level of stakeholding is
that
fantastic.
happened this year also?
This year that has been harder. I think the pandemic. So this year I think it has been harder to raise any money or raise the normal amounts that we are able to raise. I think a lot of people's priorities are going in different directions. I know a lot of us were very, very involved in the Art for Artists' project in early on in the pandemic, because to be honest, really, I'm not paying rent. The pandemic hasn't really economically destroyed my life. I'm okay. And I think a lot of us are in the privileged position to be there, and there are a lot of people who aren't. And I think from the artistic community and just generally as society, the pandemic was such a problem for so many people that I think there were a lot more needier people that were requiring of funds and stuff. And THESPO
So my
very much
question
is
is-
also funded by.
Yeah.
Is
By?
funded by the arts community, who are all
Right.
it is very much crowdfunded by the arts community, and
Mhm.
they all have meager means, so if
So
they've
are
given
the-
it to
Are the artists who are performing at THESPO, are they being paid?
no.
Or they're all facing that.
The people who in that way, yeah. So it's, I mean, THESPO is very much a platform and a way that people come together and make stuff happen.
No, I understand. Yeah.
We try and share for some of the groups. We share some of the ticket sales that hopefully we'll sell with them. But it's not a kind of invite and play, because I think there were about 55 or 53 or 55 plays that entered this year, or productions that entered this year, and of which we have a final 4 that have made it, plus another bunch which have been these collaborations with international artists and stuff like that. So.
Right. Thank you. Samara, how's the funding situation in Australia? Is the government funding? Are the corporates coming ahead?
Well, I mean, funding has always been precarious, to be.
Did you get funding for
an artist?
this project per se?
From Australian, yes, but before COVID, I received funding to develop the work, and then the way that it's been financed now is through festivals buying the work, essentially, which are internationally supported. But I just wanted to raise one thing that keeps coming up is someone discussed how there's just been this abundance of art that's been available online, and suddenly festivals are charging tickets, and people don't really have they're not used to paying for a show online, because there's been so much stuff that's been free, and then suddenly I think we're sort of out of practice with valuing the ticket of the work that is now a digital performance. I don't know if it's been similar.
What about you, Baldeep ji? This wonderful battle series that you've done, have you received any funding at all? Have you even applied? Did you try, or did you receive any?
I have
What's the first question? Did you even try? Because I say I haven't received any because I haven't tried.
I have
no one to blame.
In 93 fall, when I began, I tried to raise funding. The difference between my work and several of my contemporaries that I had the opportunity to study with, the last remaining masters who were born in the 1890s. Yeah. They did Bhai Singh, the 1897. So the information they brought were, that generation belonged to people who were already masters, megastars, long before the idea of partition began. The ones who were born in the 1908-10, even my younger granduncles, they had no idea what that generation, their elder brothers, etc., was speaking about.
Right.
So that gave me a different perspective. So in 94, especially, I tried to raise funding, Doordarshan and everybody in Delhi. And I wasted about 7-8 months. And my most important elder, Bhai Singh, born 1900, he died in the year 95 at the age of 95. So then I thought, I want to make a 35 mm format. I want to take some of the last remaining masters of the Gurbani Singhi tradition to a jungle, maybe in Himalayas. I'll have a chopper, an aviator. I'll have a chopper because these are elders. I'll have a crew for 1 month. I chose 5 compositions that were originally composed by Guru Nanak. That we'll have them all practice. We'll document everything on hi8, etc. And on the last, whenever the composition is ready, we'll shoot on 35 mm. So how much is the budget? Say, okay, 1.27 crore, roughly, let's say $200,000 now, approximately. And they said,
a very small amount for
35 mm at that time. I said, oh, Paiji, Kirtan ke upar film banayenge. What are you talking? A film on Kirtan? Why do you need a film on Kirtan? I said, come on, these are masters. You know,
Because no one ever saw it as a
but
rich classical form.
I mean,
That's where it
let's
went
not
wrong.
even go there, Raman. What people did. I mean, I said, listen, you don't know the idea of Pakhavaj, which is there in the Golden Temple tradition. Is the single most, the only tradition which was unaffected by the courts and so on and so forth. The
I would love to have a detailed discussion on this,
amazing repertoire
Believe
singing.
me.
Yeah, but
And
just to
what
come.
about the Batchet series? Did you
No, I'm coming to that.
also?
I'm coming. Allow me to share my response to that because it's important. It's related to this. Because ask ke kisi se apply. Did you apply or not? So the reason,
Yeah.
the first time I applied, then I realized that these guys, one oil tycoon said, "Okay, what's a project?" I said, "This is a project. How much does it cost?" Okay, 1.27 CR. Okay, listening to me impatiently 4-5 minutes. He said, "I'll give you 2 crores. That is 20 billion rupees. The film is mine and the money is yours." I said, "Excuse me, neither the film project nor Bhai Baldeep Singh is on sale." I walked out, never went back. So that was the beginning. In 96, I was in London. I thought, let me buy a Hi8. Suddenly the mini DV came. And me and Dr. Madan Gopal, we were all chatting, Vikram Joglekar and others. We were all like sort of always gossiping on the phone, wherever. And I called Maurizia. I said, "Hey, I'm here. I didn't know this was coming. About 3,800 pounds and so on and so forth. The gadget I need. Can I borrow money?" So Maurizia said, "Sure." So my friend Paramjit paid for it. I paid him eventually. Went to England, went to the States. My students from around the world had gathered. I taught. When I first made the film 98, I brought together the last remaining masters. In the credits, rolled the names of my students. And my students, when they saw the preview, said, "What was that?" I said, "Well, your names." I said, "But we never gave a single penny." I said, "No, but you studied from me." So I started teaching. So I said, "You paid, and I have a formula at home. If I don't bring money home, I don't take money from home." So I returned the money to Maurizia, to my wife. So this is how I have been working. If I had to wait for people to even listen to me or give money, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I just have an idea and I'm able to. Well, I pay for it. I pay for it. It's all, yeah. It's if there's money, I can do so much more. I simply say, without money, if I can do this, so many institutions run because of my ideas. So many corporates have become big people because the ideas are given over 30 years, but they're not responsible. They have no idea about how it is to make a responsible, how to responsibly attend to the cultural fabric of the nation. What is it? Bureaucrats, we're so used to, they know the country or the masters that approach them.
Yeah.
They don't visit, they don't go out to map. What is the length and breadth of my civilization? How many colors do exist?
Well, yeah.
That's
So
a big
with
problem.
with that, I will come to Sanjoy. Sanjoy, Meta happened, but was it the same funding that we got from Mahindra? And what is happening to JLF? Do you have the retainer sponsors, or have there been new sponsors or any money at all that has come in? Or they've all curtailed it because you were online? You're muted.
Before I answer that question, I just want to react to some of what I've
Sure.
heard. I think one of the interesting things that both Samara and Quasar and Anita and Bhai Baldeep Singh has sort of referred to is that the deconstruction of the proscenium space and the creation of new spaces. And we saw that in Samara's work. Quasar has always done that. Anita has been talking about it. Bhai Baldeep Singh has always recorded his stuff. So if we look at the opportunity that presents itself to us today, and we start looking at work which then can find new spaces in which to present, given the reality of today, I think that's one exciting development, that you don't necessarily have to go into, well, you can't go into a theater for the next, say, 12 to 18 months. But it certainly presents this new exciting breakdown, as does digital. The other interesting thing, especially when Quasar was speaking, Quasar, I don't know whether you know, so the camera was capturing your movement, because your signal is obviously not so great. And both for dance and theater, so it was like, it was just capturing segments of you doing this or moving back or forward, creating perhaps a language that otherwise would have been difficult to find. So there's something there
Finding
for the
solace
medium
in
that one needs to
excellence.
explore. Coming back to what coming back to what Ramanjit asked, no, it's been very difficult, Ramanjit. It started with actually the Mahindras saying, no, there's no money for Meta, and our argument to them was that if you don't support the arts now, when will you? So we said we have to do something that will allow us to be able to make sure that some money gets to the artists and artisans. The interesting thing, Ramanjit, and I think you know that, is that when when we went to the nominees for Meta and said, hey, we're going to do this online, the award ceremony is going to be online, they were like, no, 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 we don't want the money. We just want a platform to perform. So please, whatever you do, you have to find us a platform to perform. So that need, as Quasar said and Samara said, etc., the need to perform is enormous. And I think
Yeah.
we all have a collective duty to address
A
that.
performer is a performer is a performer.
Exactly. When it comes to GLF or any of our other festivals, we've seen that the digital medium, the rough translation has been 1/12 is what you get. So say we got say we got 100 rupees for from a sponsor. Today, for a digital equivalent, we would get 8 rupees or an equivalent of that. So that's obviously it has a huge impact, especially when, in our case, we are an organization with lots of people and blah blah blah. But it also has then other consequences of how do you create interesting work. And as Quasar said, the experience of theater or the performing arts, it's the exchange of energy, stage to person, but it's also that collective energy. And at the Jaipur Literature Festival, that's what it is. Or the Kumbh Mela, there are these tens of thousands of people who come together with a collective energy, and we see that is one of the pillars of why people come back to places like the Jaipur Literature Festival again and again, because of that energy exchange. So it's not just about listening to, because you can listen to people on this format as well, but it's really that collective experience that you have when you go to a place of worship, in this case, a place of the arts and literature. So I think both those, and in medieval times or ancient times, the place of worship was also the place for the arts, was also a place for congregation.
Completely. Anita.
Both, whether it was in the temple or the place of worship format, or it was in the outdoor format of of the community celebrations of pujas, etc. So somewhere that linkage, obviously, because you moved Bharatnatyam out of that because you felt that it was you needed to take it onto proscenium to break the image of the Bharatnatyam dancer being married to the temple or the temple tradition, which had other connotations. Today we do that because we want to make sure that our performance styles are secular, and this is it's a unique situation for us in India. But if you look at the choir traditions across the world, or the African American gospel tradition, or perhaps the jazz tradition to some extent, you see that. So I think all of these new, or not new, all of these existing sort of histories have come together in a very strange way in what we are seeing in this new digital world. And I think all of this affords us different opportunities, as Quasar and Samara, Anita and Bhai, Baldeep said, for collaboration, but also to revisit some of the basic tenets that we have perhaps separated ourselves from in the celebrations of the arts.
You said it very rightly. And the worship, the very basic of existence of human beings, and we've gone back to visiting the basic necessities. So whether it was the temple tradition or the choir tradition or the Gurbani Sangeet tradition, where all the compositions are in the classical ragas, it has been our history, our heritage, our, the history of the humanity itself. Now, coming to Anita Di, how challenging has it been for you to? Because I remember that you paid all the artists in the box series and the others. So, was the funding coming in? Was it again collaborative crowdfunding or no funding, or self funding, or was it coming in? You found some generous
Yeah.
funding.
No generous anything at all. But
But there will
I
be
went
some
to
hope somewhere. Yeah.
I went to my small board and I said, look, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I want you to trust me. We're going to dip into our corpus, whatever it is. It's a very important time to make discoveries, to discover new talent, to see what we can do with dance and theater, which is my first preoccupation, and the new digital medium. People are going to us at home, they're going to be glued to their devices. Let's try to create original content. That was what I wanted. I didn't want to fill my various platforms with endless chats about chai and biscuit and whatever, what stuff you're doing, because that was so easy to fill. You could just fill time. But I was really trying to see what can we do fresh, looking at the challenges. I discovered, and we paid everybody, Ramanjit, as you know, down the line,
Yeah.
a small aquarium, and we run over budget. But the point is that when I said that we were willing to extend that small honorarium to people, there was like, really? Oh, but my God, just to
Yeah.
perform,
That was my
so good,
reaction.
really?
I
And
told my
then
son, "What's the higher?" Yeah.
a lot of young people said, would you donate it? Would you donate it to a migrant worker thing? So several people also said, oh my God, this will be the first payment I get during lockdown. It was as small as it was.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no funding, no interest, but maybe there is now beginning to be an interest, small interest in funding. But as Sanjoy said, a season ticket to the Chennai season for one organization would be 1 lakh rupees to witness 50 concerts. That same online digital rate has come down to 7,500 rupees to watch the same set of digital concerts. So of course income is down, but I'm braving myself on the 27th of December to do a hybrid event. 30 people are going to be invited to my home, to my family home, where I will have music. Because as Sanjoy said, music has been able to crack it in the digital medium. If we have good audio, I do a live feed, and 30 people sitting very safe in social distancing. I think I want to experiment with the idea of this hybrid thing. At the moment, it's going to be the gratitude of having live arts in my space before the year ends. I was going to say before the world ends, but no, before the year ends. So just that, the energy of having some music in my home, level is what I'm experimenting with. But the opportunity, what I'm excited about is that I agree the digital space is here to stay. What can we do with our talent, with technology, and how can we reimagine this space for the live arts? Dance is the most difficult, but I've already seen some brilliant dance films, not from India, but some brilliant dance films using digital technology and really reimagining that moving human body, the embodiment of that. And this is what excites me. So I'm looking at collaboration across genres, across continents, because that is what is now, this medium is making it so much easier to talk to a camera person there and edit it here. It's really or a musician. So I'm very excited. I just don't have the money at the moment, but I have a feeling that the energy and the passion, it will somehow come. It's happened for me. I believe it. Crowdfunding queue as being one option, and of course the JLF is an amazing model. By Baldeep, I completely agree. Self-funded, got funded or whatever. But I think it's really important to set some kind of a standard. That's what I felt, that there's so much mediocrity in this space from morning to night, that if you do something that is thought out, and you put it out there, whether you and you don't need a huge brand, but if it's out there, and the word of mouth, and the dancers themselves share on their platform, their friends share. I just want to end with one thing. One of the things I found that got the maximum number of responses and views is unplugged, dancers unplugged, spending a day in the life as an Instagram takeover of their rehearsal, going to pick up their kids, what they eat for lunch. So we've had young people take over a page for a whole day, and we've had this enormous surge in viewership. But these young role models who are already great stars, but they just are completely in t-shirt, jogging pants, doing their riyaz, and that's something that we would never get to see. We would never get to see a day in the life of. We didn't have this medium to actually reach. And in dance, in Indian dance, we're so obsessed with beauty and this perfection and harmony. To really dismantle that has been very refreshing.
Right. My big thanks to all of you.
If I may just, Anita ji said something
and
very
then we'll
important
wind
about
up.
the quality of the content. What I saw was that anybody with a smartphone had become a television station or a radio station. Just anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And the content was just impossible to sift through. And quality, I think, is paramount.
And that brings us to Quasar. You were saying that a live performance, we do not have camera, but just check out a couple of, I remember episode 85 where Vansh Bhardwaj, I, and Taranjeet performed for Baldeep ji's Better. Just check out how the camera was used. It's eCam, and how it could, zoom in and zoom out. So that was something that Bhai ji has been experimenting.
Thank you very much. I take all the credit, yeah.
Yes, of course, it is all credit to you, because we were only performing the way we perform. So we all need to pick up these cues from each other wherever good experimentation has happened. Yeah, Samara, of course, you can respond to what Sanjoy has said, and then I'll wind up. Yes, over to you.
Something I'm still puzzling with, and I really appreciated how you framed it, Sanjoy, around these sort of new spaces that are being created, and I think that's a really, exciting way to position it. But also something I'm struggling with as an artist and also as an audience is the lack of in-between space. That the theatre, the foyer, the before, the after, and in a way you liken it to this temple or this more sacred space, which has a very clear ritual. And I think, Quasar, you were also saying, that what becomes more obvious now in these times is how important the chatter before, the chatter after, the being, this abruptness of closing the laptop screen, which will happen shortly for all of us, is very disturbing, I find, as a maker of sharing work, and then it ends. And also as an audience, this sudden isolation that is heightened. And this is something I'm still busy with and unclear, how as artists or as makers or as thinkers we can be with this. Yeah.
Samara,
the disconnect is the problem. The disconnect is enormous.
Yeah.
And therefore we go back, if you look at disconnect in terms of the philosophy, therefore you go back to what you feel are comfortable spaces and comfortable practices, which is falling back into, what I refer to in terms of the religious practice. But just one last fact is that, Quasar and all of you talked about the impact. Do remember that when NCPA, when Bruce did a survey, he figured that you need 33 people to get one person onto stage. So it's, of course, one is the impact on the performer, but the other is the impact on the lighting designer, the set designer, the janitor, the front office, the box office person, all of them who have no other real, avenue or way to be able to earn. And they have really, I think, been impacted.
Yes.
Right. Baldeep ji, you wanted to add?
I'm so glad to hear about both the spaces, space before and after. When I mentioned about, I was grappling with the same idea, because everybody goes and sees a performance, right? Which Quasar also mentioned about the idea of community. When it's a collective, yet an individual experience, but you're sitting in a collective. So when I mention about what is it to become a knowledgeable one? What is it to become an artist? And what do you become when you are an artist or a knowledgeable one, right? What happens? So that's a process of becoming a vidwan is what I wanted to share with everyone. One.
Yeah.
Two,
And
using
archive.
the technology you mentioned about the theater, what I did in dance, which surprised everybody. And they
Makeup
said,
and
oh, wow, Bhai Baldeep, that's a good one. What was it? I took the camera, requested Prerna Shirmali, Geeta Chandran, and Gopika Verma and others, and I'm going to be coming to Anita ji as well. I said, you know what? You become a patra. When Anita Ratnam ceases to be, she becomes a Radhika. She becomes a Krishna. She becomes a Rama. I want to see that process of transformation. How do you become that? What is it? What is it that you undergo? Teach
Yeah.
me that. And I did it on live, like on camera for 4 hours. Makeup is
Yeah.
being done by students, male and female. Those are important spaces, I think, where we need to educate. We need to create
Yeah, that's an
educated
important.
listeners, because in the absence of the educated listener is the absence of an educated and a responsible patron.
That gives me an idea, Baldeep ji. Maybe we could hold in a technical session with you to do this. And
I would love
Quasar,
to
you might
do
find
a
camera
play,
work.
for example.
Yeah, you
Sure.
might find that camera work interesting. In fact, Anita, they might find it interesting too. So I urge all of you to also look at the webinar that happened yesterday, which was creating hybrid performance spaces. Where Samara, we did talk about the senses, coming in play when we are together and watching the performance of smell, touch. We were even talking about the smell of the sound or the music of the sound, and that's where I have Roberto Proceda coming on 18th, who's trying to design a special sound software. He's joining us from Italy on 18th, and he'll be talking about that. So I think the technological interventions along with the live thing are going to be very, very crucial for our crucial collaborations. And what Anita Di very rightly said, Chandra said that the quality has to be maintained, where Baldeep has already ventured out and trying to create a certain kind of quality in terms of that. So thank you so much. Quasar, all the best for Tesco. We'll be keeping a watch, and I may come to you to have a longer chat about it so that audiences know about it. Baldeep ji, thank you. Continue your hard work on conservation, and we hope that the funding comes in. So if the corporates, the government bodies are listening, you must realize that Sanjoy pointed out, and all of us know, many countries termed arts as unessential. Yes, Prithviraj Kapoor used
Yeah.
to do that, keep the white chadar and for donations, and now we are doing it virtually. So we are talking about hybrid performance spaces, but we need funding for that. So you must realize that arts is definitely not an non-essential commodity. It has been the most essential, keeping the mental health and the sanity of the human beings all over the world. And artists have worked without funds, without any salaries, without any money, endlessly for this 1 year, and it becomes our social work, very important social contribution to donate to arts, to fund these projects so that we see a better and beautiful world uh, in the near future. Sanjoy, all the best for the coming GLF episodes. Samara, I wish you all the best for your next venture, and we hope to collaborate with Quasar and all of us together. Anita Di, bravo, and Andala Gardens, and many more curatorial work. And I hope we see you at
Thank you.
Baldeep Ji's Battle Call
Thank you.
very soon, doing your patra and upatya, as Natya Shastra says. Thank you for sparing your morning for Jairangam. Thank you, Deepak Gairaji and Hema Gairaji, and all the very best to Jairangam team for doing this wonderful work and creating. Do
Thank you.
catch all the events audience at Jairangam. Wonderful workshops, performances, and webinars. And we see you on 18th for 5th webinar, Reimagining and Devising, episode 2, with Roberto Proceda from Italy, Mita Kaushik from UK, and Marion Couturel from France.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Quasar. Bye,
I love
Sanjoy.
to have Sanjoy as well. We will talk.